Hello everyone! So for the beginning of this project, the students are painting their backgrounds black using their knowledge of color theory to create black paint using only the primary colors. Then they can add any kind of blues or purples for a galaxy look and some white stars. Here I'm showing all of the different colors of the paper for the paper quilling that I have. So, and then the slot tool and the tweezers. So I had containers that I put all of these materials in for my students. And I kept them organized by keeping them in those containers with lids. So I separated them by color, and then I had the slotted tools, enough for one per student, tweezers enough for one per student. And actually, since this video, I got some precision glue bottles as well that I filled with Elmer's glue and a little bit of water to make it easier to get out of the precision tip of the bottle. So instead of just using a regular glue bottle like that, they can get the precision glue bottles for about 1 or 2 per table. If you don't have that option, then you could also get paint palettes and fill them with glue and then have them use really small paint brushes to apply the glue as well for a more precise glue application rather than using glue bottles. So here I'm just showing different versions or techniques of the paper coiling. So the first one was a tight coil, a loose coil, a teardrop, an eye shape. The next one was a square kind of rectangle. The one I'm doing now is a star shape. And as you can see, as I'm building all of these, it's the same process. So you insert the paper into the slitted tool. You twist the paper on that tool using your index finger and your thumb to hold it in place, like that. And then you just keep twisting until you get the amount of the coil that you need, and you can cut off any excess paper if you want the coil to be slightly smaller. And then once you glue the edge of the paper down and it's the size that you want, then you can start shaping the coil into any of these shapes. And for some of them, you do kind of have to bend them before, like this one for example. You bend the paper in half and then coil each half of that paper in the opposite direction to create that shape. But usually you'd create the coil, glue it closed like this, and then shape it. And so that's the triangle shape there. That one I was not a huge fan of, but I fixed it a little bit later on. And if you want it to be a little looser, you just let it release before you glue down that end of the paper. And feel free to pause the video here if you need to reference these shapes a little bit more, or go back in the video to watch how I made those individual shapes. So here I'm using that background that I created. And again, now I have the precision glue bottles, which are a little bit easier, but using a regular glue bottle is totally fine too, if that's what you have. I'm creating an outline of a planet first, so I just made kind of a very loose coil, glued that down. And now I'm making tighter coils to fill up that loose coil. So I wanted to show my students as many different techniques of the coiling as possible. So here I have tight coils, loose coils, and then later on I'm also going to be using like an eye shape, a teardrop shape, the S coil, the duck foot shape, so as many shapes as I can possibly get. And you can hardly see it, but the outline that I had first created is separated into 3 sections, so that's where I'm changing the colors from light blue to a medium blue, and then I'm going to use dark blue at the very top. And there you could kind of see some of the coils were a little bit too loose, so I cut some of the strips of paper in half and then coiled them so that it would make really small coils, and then I used the tweezers to get them into those loose coils to fill them up a little bit more. The tweezers are really helpful to place down the coils in really small areas, or if you're trying to fit it in or around other coils. So here, I don't know if I would recommend this. I did lay down the glue on the background before I placed the coils down. I was using clear glue, so I thought maybe it would dry clear. It did, but it was a different sheen than the background, the paint. So the paint was matte, and then the glue dried a little bit glossy. So even though it was clear, you could still kind of see it in a certain light. So I would recommend just putting glue on the coil itself before putting it down on the paper, holding it down with the palm of your hand for maybe 20 or 30 seconds to let it dry, and then it should stay down just fine. I am always telling anyone who will listen that more is more and less is a bore when it comes to art, but when it comes to glue, that is the one thing that I will admit less is more. So less glue, and then if you need to, you can always go back in and re-glue something down if possible, but you don't want a lot of glue to seep out the edges. Here I started filling it not just with the coil shapes, but I was bending the paper in half or in quarters and then trying to fit it with the tweezers around to kind of create lines rather than just circles. And then my students have to use 5 different techniques and make 5 objects. So this example has 7 objects, including the small stars. And here's the example. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.